I'm Mark DeGarmo, and with me today on Wednesday, May 27th, 2020, at around 3 p.m. Eastern Time are Andra Corvino and Ernesta Corvino. Would you please introduce yourselves and also, describing yourselves and also your geographic location?
Okay, well, I'm Ernesta Corvino. This is my sister, Andra Corvino. We are the daughters of the maestro Alfredo Corvino. And we live presently in Norwalk, Connecticut. We moved here about 5 years ago from Midtown Manhattan. And the idea was to move out of the city, but not too far away, so that we can continue to go into the city and teach there, but to find a house big enough to, number one, have a studio out of which we can work, which is proving very valuable now in this time of our lockdown, so I can Zoom classes all over the world, and also a house big enough to accommodate dancers and other artists coming in from the city for retreats, for weekend workshops, seminars, whatever. And in the future, we are looking forward to having salon evenings where all sorts of artists participate, get to share their work, meet each other, possibly be inspired to collaborate with each other, and have the option of, let's say, if the salon is on a Friday evening or Saturday evening, to stay overnight here and the next day to use our spaces, our various spaces. We have a big piece of property to continue to be inspired and do their work. So that's where we're at right now. Andra can tell you a little bit about our history.
Our history, well.
It's a long one.
It's a long one. We came from a dancing family, particularly my dad, Alfredo Corvino, born in Montevideo, Uruguay, came to the United States by way of the Yos Ballet Company in the early 40s, was it? And upon arriving in New York, World War II saw its peak and everyone disbanded. He stayed, and Uruguay being an ally of the United States, he was conscripted into the Army. And so he served in the American Army.
That was after he actually danced with the Ballet Russe and became a soloist.
That's right.
There.
I'm skipping that whole part. Yes, yeah. And so that's what brought him to New York, and that's what made him stay in New York. He felt like he had always belonged in New York as soon as he hit the shores. So staying in New York and continuing dancing with the Metropolitan Opera, and he danced at the Roxy and a bunch of other places. He studied with many of the great Russians in New York, many of the great Italians in New York. He came from a Russian-French background of dance. He met my mother in the late 40s, and after Ernesta was born, I was born first, and 4 years later, after Ernesta was born, he decided to stop performing, which was causing him to have to tour a lot and be away from home. So he stopped touring and settled down to teach on the request of Anthony Tudor, who recognized his gift for pedagogy. And Tudor brought him into the fold of the faculty of the Metropolitan Opera Ballet and the newly formed Juilliard School. And upon those two assignments, he started to really cut his teeth as a teacher. He loved it. He was a happy workaholic. He could dance 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and not regret it. And he told my mother that too. He said, "I love you very dearly." He said, "But first I'm married to the ballet." And she said, "Okay, I get it." But he was always a good husband and always a great father. And so yes, he continued teaching at the Met through its demise in 1968. He started in about 52, taught till the school was ended in 1968.
Right, and then he continued at Juilliard even into their move to Lincoln Center. And simultaneously, that year was 1969, 1970, he opened his own school in the heart of the theater district, the Dance Circle, and continued to teach there while he was also teaching at Juilliard. And that's where we cut our teeth on teaching and choreographing. Eventually what happened was I started my own company with the Dance Circle as being its base. and had many years of producing concerts and choreographing a lot of pieces and performing at the Riverside Church and places like that, touring the Eastern United States. And yes, and then in, what was it, 1993, we had to give up that studio due to the rising cost of the rent. And good old Dad, he retired from Juilliard in 1994, only to join Pina Bausch as her ballet master.
At the age of what?
At the age of, I don't know what, he continued the last 10, 11 years of his life. He toured with her, and, you know, and it was just a marvelous connection. And Andra took over his post at Juilliard. I remained freelance, choreographing and teaching all over the world. And after Dad passed away in 2005, I took up the reins of being one of the ballet masters of the Pina Bausch Company. And Andra remained at Juilliard until recently, when she left and became freelance herself. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Big story.
Astonishing. And we can also read about it in Dawn Lilly's book to some degree, the Equipoise, is it?
Equipoise is the name of the book.
Equipoise.
Well, Equipoise, the life and work of Alfredo Corvino by Dawn Lilly, Dawn, L-I-L-L-E, published by Rosen Publishers. And it's very available on Amazon.
It's so wonderful that Dawn was able to pull that together, and with a series of interviews too with your dad and with you both, I'm sure.
Yes, she started in the early 2000s and went beyond his and my mom's death. Mom died in 2004. He passed in 2005. The book finally came out officially in 2009. So it was many years of research.
Wow. I'm also remembering personally having come to New York in September of 1974, and that fall studying at Dance Circle with no ballet training at all. It took a while to come back because I was immersed in all kinds of other modern dance studies, Nikolai Lewis, May O'Donnell, you know, Hawkins-based folks, somatics-based stuff. But then came back to prepare for the Juilliard audition. It took me a year and a half of study to prepare just for the audition to gain entry. And your dad and his faculty, Richard as well, Richard Lyle. I just am so grateful to them for having given me that opportunity, you know.
We remember it well.
But thank you. Such a great atmosphere, always such a family atmosphere, and also very rigorous, of course, but always a deep, abiding sense of support and working well together. It just was beautiful.
Yeah. We were a good team. And then all of you, of course, rounded out the family. So we loved going there every day.
Thank you. Before the pandemic, how would you have described your creative practice and work?
Well, you know, of course, before the pandemic, most of it took place in community, physical community, in being in the studio with our dancers, both for teaching and for rehearsing. And nothing quite replaces that live exchange, that immediacy of being physically together, both in the dancing and in just the communing. And yes, that's the way I would describe it in my memory now, although it's only been, 3 months of the lockdown. It's like a distant memory, strangely enough. But it's still, of course, very vivid and very visceral, that this feeling of being able to create by way of the feedback, the inspiration that your dancers give to you to create. You don't create in a vacuum. It's the inspiration and that feedback you get from your dancers, whom you admire and respect and love deeply and work well with. And then you can go home or back into the studio on your own and embellish upon the creation. But the source of the inspiration is from the dancers themselves. And the best way to get that is in person, in my opinion.
Well, Ernesta's doing a lot of teaching through Zoom right now. And she's commenting upon how tiring it is because you don't have that immediate energetic feedback from those around you. Yeah, you're through a screen, they can see you, and if you stop doing what you're doing and peer at them a little bit, you can sort of see them, but it's not the same thing as all being communally involved, you know, in one location.
And also dance is so tactile.
And
even
yes,
though
right.
as teachers and even as a choreographer, I'm not a touchy-feely. I don't say do this, do this. We teach by the principles and let the dancer own what they're doing instead of being puppeted. But even so, the inability to go up and touch, you know, even if it's just a hug, is so missing now, and so you know, sorely missed. So yeah, it took me a while to get used to Zooming. I still haven't tried to Zoom with the creative process. I haven't tried to choreograph via Zoom yet. It might yet happen. I'm not sure. I've been lately, since I moved out here, I've been going back to the solo form in my choreography, revisiting that, because I realized in my choreographic career it started as solos, and then gradually it was 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, until, you know, a mass of people, a big cast. And now I find myself going back to the pure form of the solo, and I'm currently working on a new solo for myself. So that's where I've been at choreographically. So I haven't had the experience of trying to create through the internet media yet. It might happen, if for no other reason, just out of my own curiosity as to what that would be like. So.
Well, that'll be fun to see, Ernest. I really look forward to seeing your solo work in this new phase. It'll be fascinating to see.
Yeah, it's a fairly dark piece. It's not a comment on the pandemic. I started working on it before the virus showed itself. It's more of a personal, you know, emotional thing. It's called Raw Heart, and it's the music by the Balanescu Quartet. So we'll see what happens.
Well, your musical choices, also in your ballet teaching, are just extraordinary. I've always found them so very moving and striking on so many levels. I mean, you're obviously so deeply steeped in music, classical music, contemporary, all kinds of musical idioms.
Yes, music is our life, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, it was funny, in anticipation of having these salons here at the house, I invested in a digital piano, a Yamaha 88 key, you know, the real thing, but with all the bells and whistles of the different voices and rhythms and whatnot. And I thought to myself, I'm going to need this if we're going to have pianists come share their work. Also, maybe if we have pianists play for class, I can move it down into the studio, etc.
Oh, wow.
But when it arrived, I got inspired, and I thought, I'd like to learn how to play the piano. So I got an online app thing, you know, and I took 2 lessons with the app. And the next thing I knew, I was composing songs and writing lyrics to them. So now I have 16 songs that I've composed and written lyrics to. Andra says they all sound the same.
No, not really, but it's okay.
But somehow I'm playing the piano and writing songs.
I live with the Partridge Family.
So it's funny. That's another way that the creativity kind of leaked out during this lockdown time. I'd wake up in the morning reciting poems or with tunes in my mind and writing songs. And I had no intention, no forewarning that this would happen. But I'm a true believer that, you know, creativity is just everywhere. It really is everywhere. And you don't know how much lives inside of you until a situation brings it out.
That's fascinating. That was really my question, you know, how are you practicing your creativity and creative work during this time? But, you know, are there other ways you're finding it's emerging as well? Or that's an awful lot.
Andra is cooking. Finally, we got this beautiful new house with a great kitchen, and we were going out to restaurants every night. I'd say, Andra, we've got to use that beautiful kitchen. She's like, well, now,
yeah,
and she's getting good too.
And I'm delving a lot into somatics too. Somehow that's interesting me, along with the artistic side of teaching dance. So I'm boning up on anatomy and kinesiology, and that's interesting me. So I'm doing some
You're
of
good
that.
at that. You really
So-
understand it. You have a good grasp, and you're a good communicator too. Like when we have our pedagogy sessions after the class, of course, a lot of it is, literally dance questions, technique questions, musical questions. But of course, people are coming from their own places somatically, with old injuries and whatnot. And Andra is very articulate with them and helpful to
I
them.
hope I am. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm
No, you're-
learning.
Well, also you're learning through your own experience, your
Yes.
own body. You have decades in your own body and your own
Yes.
experience. Nothing replaces
Many
that.
decades.
Many decades.
Oh, that's wonderful. Are there certain approaches that you're experimenting with, or?
Feldenkrais is
Yes, Feldenkrais really fascinated me. I've been in a technique for a long time. Feldenkrais really fascinates me. Of course, I studied with Irene Dowd at Juilliard. I was privileged enough to be able to sit in on her anatomy classes, and I have all her literature and brilliant stuff, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and all those people. Eric Franklin and his book on conditioning for dance and all the people that he draws from to explain imagery and exercises for the different parts of the body, how to integrate it. Just kind of very eclectic and and realizing how much influence we have over our own healing and over our own well-being by the structure of our thoughts and our behavior. So that's also been interesting for me at this age.
what age?
Yeah, really, 16, 19?
Oops.
Sorry, I didn't mean to let it out.
Yeah. Yes, I'm having my sweet 16 next month. So.
Yay. No, it's fascinating to hear you talk about it, with a life and dance, and also how we've seen how much, how many people are extending through their entire lifetimes now a dance practice, which in the day we might have thought in classical ballet, we were over the hill at 23 or, whatever it might be, crazy young age.
Right.
But I think there's something very wise for us, for the culture, to be able to accept artistry that has been developed over a lifetime.
That's right.
Well, this is not particularly a culture that is inclined towards that. We're such a youth-fixated culture. And what we're finding now, to bring up a whole other subject, is ageism, especially now in the dance education world.
Oh, interesting.
That even, people who have their PhDs and their terminal degrees and have had years and years experience in the university system teaching dance, get booted out in favor of these youngsters who are just a lot younger. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to our way of thinking, where you just get better and better as you get older, especially as an educator, as a teacher. So maybe you can't get up in front of these students and show off and do big jumps and big turns and make big lines like you used to. But who needs that in a teacher when the teacher has the wisdom and the skill to really teach and impart? So that we've been finding very distressing, and it seems to get younger and younger every decade. Now it's like if you're over 40, it's a problem. And that is just unconscionable to us.
It's so interesting you're saying that, Ernesta, because I was reading some studies that were saying that definitely education, teaching, is one profession where we get better and better, and we can continue. And I think your father, obviously, Dr. Maestro Corvino, was the epitome of a lifelong inquiry, teacher as student, almost, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Beginner's mind. Yes, absolutely. I know it's, and then now with all this YouTube stuff and people doing extraordinarily freaky things in front of the camera and Instagram, we just read an article by a Russian
Diana
ballerina
Vishneva.
who was very distraught at the fact that young people are being exposed to this kind of exaggeration, and I think that they're expected to be that.
That's what dancing is.
Yes, that's what dancing is, that they're expected to be that at this very moment without being clued into the discipline and the time that it takes to
The nuances, the art form.
to create yourself as a dancer
It's
and
not
an
circus
artist.
trick.
And that, you know, they're starting to think if they don't have bodies that look like these bodies, then they are nothing. It's very sad. I mean, I feel bad for young people who are easily influenced by this, because that's not the truth when it comes to dance and art. There's room for everybody.
Well, that's been the other message of the Corvino school over the years, or the approach. I don't mean to,
Right.
put it in a pigeonhole, but
No.
the philosophy, the pedagogical approach. I remember I asked your dad advice when I was going to Lima to work on my Fulbright 20 years ago, and he just reiterated what he always taught, which was really, we have everybody study because we need a community to dance for, with, and I've always been so impressed that there's so many lifelong dedicated practitioners that you attract with your teaching, who might have other professions but are very serious students, practitioners of the form.
Right. Well, we approach our teaching as we teach dance, we teach ballet in its true form to anybody who has the interest in it. We don't make any judgment about how you're going to use it or not. And we firmly believe that if you're going to study something, you need to study the real thing with no apologies and no excuses. Like now we have terms like, oh, this is ballet for the contemporary dancer. This is ballet for this. We just teach ballet, it's just like we just don't make any excuses or limitations. It's the real thing. You deserve to come and learn the real thing, even if it's difficult for you, even though you feel that you fall short and you're not going to have a career in it. It doesn't matter. It's the process. And do the real thing. I mean, when I sign up to learn something, I want to learn the real thing. I don't want a teacher telling me, well, since you're never going to be, a competitive kayaker, then you just kayak like this. No, I want to learn how to really kayak, So, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's very inspiring. I mean, having been taking some of your ballet bars, your 6 days a week, one of the things that started occurring to me recently was that I'm learning, like, I feel like a pianist. I feel like an instrumentalist through your work. And again, it's interesting, Andra, to hear you say you're delving more into somatics. Because I've also thought it's almost like physical therapy, in the sense that with good physical therapy, you only do exactly what you need to do.
Yes, exactly.
There's no extra, because there's no point. It's going to be detrimental at the end of the day.
Well, you have to be sensitive. My dad always said, don't work hard, work sensitively. And there's a big difference between knowing these subtleties and going deeply enough to work from the principles and to know what you need to do because that's what you need at that moment or that much, and not to push, not to have a preconceived idea about, working
More is
hard
better.
and more is better, but to be sensitive, and then you get what you need from it. You have to work sensibly and sensitively.
Well, thank you for that. I know there's so many people that will benefit from your years of training, teaching, learning, exploring, asking questions. I feel that your work could be studied by teachers to learn how to teach as well, and use an inquiry method as well.
Yeah, it's very Socratic.
Is there, or what advice might you give your peers and other artists at this time?
You mean especially the pandemic, being that we're kind of locked up and not able to be with each other?
Yeah, I think so. I think people might be wondering, what other people are feeling and thinking and how we're connecting our commonality.
Well, I think, everything has its pros and cons, and I, for one, am very grateful for the internet. I always have been since getting involved with it, 20 years ago, that it's a great way to communicate and to expand your knowledge. And I find it invaluable at this time. I mean, what would we do without being able to Zoom each other and to work together through this medium? So I remain very positive. I try not to become very negative and say, oh, look at all the trash out there on the internet. You don't know what's real and what's not real, and the fake news and this. And I'm like, I don't go there. I use it for what it's good for, and I think it's especially good for us. I mean, we're all using it now, and I think we should be grateful for it and use it well, use it wisely. The other thing is that I feel this way in general as a life philosophy, and certainly in my work. I never like to project too much. A lot of people that have a lot of grand ideas and are very ambitious, that's great. But I think there's a danger in projecting too much, and especially now, like everyone's saying, when can we get back in the studio? When is this going to be over? Well, we don't know. So we're going to have to talk about staying present. Here we are. This is, to me, the big lesson of all of this. Staying present, staying positive, and using what we have at our disposal at each moment to make the best of things. And as a result, I'm very surprised. I don't know if a year ago someone had told me, you're going to be locked down for months, and you're just going to be staying home. What are you going to do? I probably would have gone, But as soon as it came upon us, we made the adjustments. It was strange at first. It was definitely sad at first. And now I feel totally acclimatized to it and feel like I'm getting the best out of it because I'm not projecting. And I always do the same thing with my work. I remember when I was younger, people would say, well, what's your goal? What's your ambition? Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now with your company? And I said, I don't know. I just do the work day by day. And I don't know, that might be contrary to a lot of the way people think they have to think and what they have to do to get ahead. I know we've been very privileged to be brought up in a dance family. We haven't had to do a lot of the things other people have had to do. It was sort of given to us. So I don't want to assume that, everybody would think and react the same way I would. But that's kind of my philosophy. And I think it does work, especially now if you're mature. I mean, I feel bad for young people. I really do. I mean, I have some young students who are just crawling the walls, and I can feel their tension, But especially for mature people who are established in their field, and just continue the work day by day. That's what it's about.
I love hearing you talk about it, Ernesta. I think that's really such a gift to give out to us all. Thank you. You've mentioned it a little bit, but are there other creative projects and upcoming opportunities in the works for you?
Not necessarily, not certainly not choreographically right now. Teaching-wise, possibly. Hope to continue my work with the Pina Bausch Company. Also, possibly with the Limon Company. I've had a bit of a hiatus from them. They have a new director now, and he's interested in our teaching. Also, we've had some other people mention that they're coming up with teaching projects, starting programs and such, that they're interested in involving us. So that's very exciting. And I'm kind of just looking forward to working a little bit on my own with my own choreography, and also these salon evenings. I think a lot of good, interesting stuff is going to come out of them. We just get the ball rolling.
I can't wait for them. This sounds really exciting.
Yes. Well, you've been an inspiration because you've been doing salons, and I've been keeping my eye on that and gathering a lot of inspiration from that.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, maybe we'd love to invite you to share your work in process if we might.
Same here. Every time I think of the salon evenings, I see you in here doing something. So,
Oh, thank you. I would absolutely love it. Is there anything else that you might like to share with us all?
No, not really.
how to catch woodchucks?
I live in the country life here.
I know, right? Well, thank you so much, Ernesta Corvino and Andra Corvino, for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Mark DeGarmo. You're very much loved by us
Yes,
and
what a
very
privilege.
respected.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.